Many people regard you as a personification of Ubuntu. What do you understand Ubuntu to be?
In the old days when we were young, a traveler through a country would stop at a village and he didn't have to ask for food or for water. Once he stops, the people give him food, entertain him. That is one aspect of Ubuntu, but it will have various aspects. Ubuntu does not mean that people should not enrich themselves. The question, therefore, is, are you going to do so in order to enable the community around you to be able to improve? These are the important things in life. And if one can do that, you have done something very important which will be appreciated.
This is the Open Source Report on the 12th of November 2017 from WBRN Radio in Boston and the Boston Red Network in collaboration with Cranston Analytics and Cranston Software. We'll start out with the kernel. We always start out with the most stable Linux kernel. 4.13.2 is the most stable one. And let me see, what are we using these days? The long-term kernel, which is 4.9.61 or somewhere there. We also use the Slackware edition. A little different here, but that is what we are running on the Linux server, and everything is up to date as far as I know. And we encourage people to keep their installments or updates up to date in their Linux distributions, and they should also keep those up to date in anything they're running, even if it's, say, a Windows system or whatever. Nonetheless, we'll get to it right. Now from Tech Republic, I was looking at this from Linux.com. This is Munich in Germany. They pioneer Linux shop there in Munich. And they are supposedly voted to roll out Windows 10 in 2020. That is, 3 years off? They'd have to start next year. And this is published by Nick Heap, on the 8th of November. The city of Munich, famous for ditching the Microsoft products in favor of open source software, agreed today to stop using Linux and switch back to Windows in a pivotal move. The decision, if the decision is ratified by the full council in 2 weeks, Windows 10 will start rolling out in the city in 2020. The vote marks a major shift from an organization that once was at the vanguard of open source software movement a decade ago, from switching thousands of computers from Windows to Linux. At the time, the leaders of the project talked about the city having won its independence by cutting the ties with the Microsoft monopoly. No doubt they did. Today's politicians in Munich's administration and personnel committee voted to reverse that work. With the decision would need approval from the full council on the 23rd. Dr. Florian Ruf, leader of the Green Party in Munich, said the committee's decisions are normally simply confirmed by the council without change. However, he said the Green Party would be pushing for a detailed discussion and consideration decision by the full council. I think it's a great mistake adding that it would place unnecessary burdens and costs on Munich at a time it's already restructuring its IT department, implementing new laws on e-governance. E-governance is a big thing in many, many areas these days. while the 2 to 3 year rollout of Windows 10 would begin in 2020. Preparatory work, early morning here, preparatory work for the Switch would begin next year. 10 would be installed on every computer, about 29,000 boxes, and would replace Munich, a custom version of the OS Ubuntu, which is currently used across the council, alongside preparatory work to migrate Windows. An external expert would assess whether to move Windows 10 to represent a good value for money and report back next year. Dr. Roof questioned the wisdom of beginning the preparatory work on the migration before the assessment is made, and that in itself is a very good situation. Now, what has happened in many areas in Germany, the move of some of their parties to the right, and I've looked at where Munich is, but to move to Windows 10 as well as a separate move to Microsoft Office is expected to cost millions, and it's rumored to be more than 100 million euros. That's insanity. A return to Office. Politicians at the committee also backed a trial of Office 2016 to see if it should replace the open source LibreOffice. We use LibreOffice, like LibreOffice. They supported a proposal to use on 6,000 boxes of computers, whatever you want to call it. We have 12 to 20,000 macros and applications that are connected to a LibreOffice. When it comes to changing them to Microsoft Office, we don't know how difficult it would be. Well, waste of time. One of the founders of the Document Foundation, the organization behind LibreOffice, said that despite today's vote, Munich has proved it was possible for a major organization to run Linux-based desktops. Now, a big effect in driving the decision to return to Windows appears to be a change in the political. Yeah, well, that was what we'd already assumed. A turning point was Dieter Rede as the mayor in 2014, replacing Christian Udy, the mayor of 21 years, who played a key role in the Linux project, a reality, and making a reality. Today, the CSU political party, which Roop said had always been opposed to Lil Mune, also is part of the ruling coalition in Munich. It's this coalition and the SPD politicians that have pushed the proposal forward. And this is one of the things that to remember, that so-called politics plays a great role in what has happened. So if you have a more right-of-center type of government, this is what will happen to you. However, the Win consultants from, again, here comes the censure, and produced a detailed study of IT at Munich. They didn't pinpoint open source software as being to blame for the problem. Now, okay, our Munic's client fundamentally works, but it's not effective or intuitive, and there are regular problems when you add some software regular compatibility problems. Now, this is from Christina Frank, a party member with the CSU, said the continual use of Limune was no longer viable due to being incompatible with software in and outside of the council. Now, I'm not sure about all this. Incidentally, that's LIMUX. Bill Munich. Anyway, they identified issues. Now, this is from these characters from Accenture. how updates are managed, with difficulty caused by fragmented nature of the Munich IT department, outdated back-end infrastructure. The upshoot to the consultants was obsolete, partially unsafe, and usually extremely cumbersome IT lead to a lot of waste of money and productivity. But that can happen with any system. Since completing the move, the city has always kept a small number of Windows boxes to run incompatible software. About 4,000 of those are still around compared to 20,000 Linux boxes. But they can run with Linux boxes. That's no big deal there. This came from from Linux.com. It's a roundup of the week's news. Let's look at this. Google. We've been doing some things with Google. Google's, incidentally, a new bill is called Oreo. Now, the whole idea of this bill from Google is to integrate global, or to address, I should say, global diversity. What they've done with this particular one, with the Google client that's on your mobile device, to basically turn it into what we old school types would call a caching server. That you would be able, in areas that there are power difficulties or there are broadband, a lack of broadband, in other words, the internet connection is a little bit faster than what we used to call dial-up. But nonetheless, once you reach a web page, that web page would be cached, and if your connection does go down, you would be able to continue with the process, and the next time you came back online, you would be able to finish whatever you were engaged in at that particular time. Now, this is a very interesting concept, because what it does is, in emerging markets, particularly in parts of India and various other countries in the outback, say for instance in Kenya or in Nigeria or whatever, that you would integrate populations in those areas into the rest of the Google ecostructure. Google, as you know, has been involved in various schemes, we'll call them balloons, taking around wireless connections. In other words, the whole idea is, if you are going to have web services out there, you have to be able to get the people online. So if you have balloons, or you have satellites, or you have various kinds of transmission, those are the things that help you. And of course, now what has happened is fiber optics have reached onto various emerging countries on the African continent. So now it is there, and it's sort of like what happened when Cuba finally got their fiber optic cable through an Italian enterprise, and now they have several of those, and they are able now to access the internet. The same with the Democratic Republic of Korea. From China, they are able to access the internet. So as people get access through those fiber optic cables, they can either run Oberlin, or they can run across the sea and be tapped into. And also satellite transmissions, they use a lot of those in Afghanistan and places of that nature, are getting a much faster new generation of satellites. So in other words, that is where Google is, and what you're doing is you are integrating emerging markets in, and a little more than integrating emerging markets in. You're making it possible for developers in the emerging markets to be integrated in. We recently perused the Google Chrome conference, and looking at the presenters there were some presenters. There were a few women presenting, people with a person with a disability, but there were no one from an emerging African country there, period. So those are the kinds of things when under the so-called broad cloud that's called diversity. Uh, we like to look at it as a diversity of or integration of emerging markets and of people in the markets, because what you have to have is the old campaigner, corporate campaigner, back at the time down at 5018 Wall Street, a location owned by no other than the notorious DJ Trump, who now occupies the White House. Anyway, we were given housing there and set up the corporate project to influence the necessary, at the time it was called affirmative action, into corporate America. And we're still struggling to do that. And the open source movement is actually the vehicle to do that, because open source integrates everyone, no matter from where continent they come, from what ethnic organization they come, from what color they are, etc. So the people are integrated into the process. And once you have that, you have a developed ecosystem. So with the work of Google and with Oreo, we are starting to see that happen. IBM, of course, has a Watson Development Center in Nairobi, Kenya. So those are the kinds of things that start to move forward, and that's why in Munich there is a step back. We need to look at all of this across, as they say, the vertical chessboard. In the words of the New York Times writer, Mr. Friedman, the world is now flat. Well, to make the world flat, we have to make the people that develop this and the companies look like the quote-unquote flat world. So that in itself is where the direction in which we are traveling, and we are propagandizing around as we propagandize for open source. Linux, the kernel. The kernel, incidentally, has been upgraded finally in Google Chrome. And those are the kinds of things we are attempting to do. And also, you look at Google and their partnership with Samsung. In urban America, the mobile phone is the principal way of accessing what proverbially is called the internet. We call it the net, or whatever you want to call it, and social media. So in other words, all these things are tied into access of people to platforms, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, various other platforms such as we're on now, accessing iHeart and accessing Spreaker. And so emerging markets, people of color have to have access to these markets, because from those access points, the Googles of the world and the mercantile people sell their products to us. Never forget that. Microsoft has to sell so-called Windows 10 now. I don't know if Windows 10 went to 17 now. Maybe they'll come out with Windows 17. I think they'll probably just drop the number. But that really doesn't matter. What does matter is you access it. If you're accessing it on a mobile device, you're using Android. Now, Android, Bill Gates used Android. It is partially open sourced, not completely open sourced. And that's one of the things we want to do, and you get your library applications, etc. Anyway, nonetheless, I'm just looking at another article here. Google has built an audio kit for games and virtual reality. Now, this is something that is emerging here. Immersive audio is particularly important in areas. This is more gaming and virtual reality, but what we want to do is keep this open source. What works on your computer may be useless on your phone. Google wants to fix that, launching the the auto resident, including resident Auto, an open source software development tool, will bring auto audio to games, virtual reality, 360-degree video across many devices and platforms. Now, this would be Android, iOS, the Mac OS, Linux, and Windows are all covered. The technology bars from Google's AR audio kit to partialize hundreds of, 3D sound sources in real time. Let's take a look at this audio kit. Let me just finish this up here. Could produce clever effects, even relatively low performance hits. All platforms. Resident audio not only will offer control over where the audio is coming from, but it is and how it's propagated. You can narrow the spread, for example, make it so that it sounds louder when facing an object. The technology works in multiple engines, including Unreal engines, etc. And if you're building with Unity, you can pre-calculate the reverberation effects. And it's up to developers to make the resident audio, but there is no guarantee that they will. So anyway, this is the resident audio factory. I don't think I can integrate this in because we're dealing with different workstations here. We will link this link in to the show, and we can get the Google page up here. We'll be in good time. We just moved back here. We were looking at some of the things that we're updating here, and from the Linux Foundation primarily. I don't know if we'll cover Kubernetes here or not. I think we probably won't. But how to set up a remote Linux desktop, we'll take a look at it while we're looking and waiting on Google. I'm not sure. Maybe we'll. Okay. Well, at least we'll start this off. Linux is a remarkably flexible operating system. We know that. One of the easiest means of understanding this, when you see it, that given a task, always multiple paths to success. No doubt about that. Generally speaking, your desktop will determine the route you take, but there's some options far easier than others once you understand the streamlined modern desktop. Let's see. From Ubuntu to Fedora. Some people still use Fedora. Fedora 26, including the default GUI desktop setting to remote connection. The first thing you must do is enable sharing. If you open up, anyway, that is intuitive. You can enable access options for new connections. I have to do that. This is pretty straightforward stuff here. Now this is for an Ubuntu machine. You can do it also in Slackware. You need to install an application. Let me see. It's part of the remote client. Add necessary repositories. Yeah, we'll do that. Update app source. This is to them Fedora, basically about the same thing, where you add necessary piece of software to the Kubuntu. Well, this Kubuntu desktop, won't get into that one. Separate remote connection. Yes, there are plenty of other ways to enable this type of connection. Yeah, you can do that. Installing one of many VNIC servers out there, Tiger VNIC, etc., and get a connection there. Not a big deal. We'll put this on the Cranston software Twitter feed. Good place for it to be. Let's see anything else we can find here. Yeah. We haven't. So let me move back to this Google piece. We can find it. Okay. This is a Google audio platform, multi-platform. Sparkle audio at scale is what it's called. As humans, we rely on sound to guide us through our environment, no doubt about that. And performance that scales up on mobile desktops, that's what it's all about. We will go ahead and place this up. And let's see what the SKU runs. Well, it runs all of them. We went over that, the Linux platform, the Android, which we are more concerned about here, provides native APIs for C, Java, Objective-C. We won't get into all of that. But the Web Auto API here, we'll just go ahead and put this on. The point I wanted to make is models complex sound environments by producing powerful tools for accurately modeling complex sound environments. Resonance audio goes even beyond the 3D specialization. I'll see if I can. I don't think we can get the sound over here. We saw it. This is just a little YouTube video here. I don't think I can. I can get my mic up to this speaker. Probably will. Yeah, it won't work. Anyway, that's what happens when you're doing live radio. There are things that work, and there are things that do not work, and that's one of the things that did not work. Anyway. We'll just put it up there. Looking at Tech Republic here, I don't. Go. Okay. Anyway, we'll go now to Mr. Krebs, I suppose, is where we will end up here. Let's take a quick look at week here. Wait a minute. We'll look at IT innovation here. This is from Red Hat, one of the original open source houses. It's been around for honestly a very, very long time. Try to look around a little bit here. Red Hat is involved in a number of areas of IT that use a Linux operating system as its base, providing direction on many fronts, no doubt about that. At the end of the day, the data center has been long dominated by x86 server chips, no doubt about that. He noted that it's still somewhat early in the market for ARM. Well, ARM is out there also. And we are not going to build the next Tessar Flow. It's not our course string anyway. Among the larger ideas that interest Wright are evolving architecture, application deployments, which is starting to change with increased mobility. There's no doubt the Internet of Things, that is a buzzword. You will be continuing to hear the Internet of Things. It is an effective situation. To Mr. Krebs here, simple banking security tips, verbal passwords. Incidentally, Mr. Krebs used to be at the, he calls it Krebs on security. We'll put it there. But anyway, a time when I was content to let my banking authenticate me over the phone by asking for some personal identifiers that are broadly for sale in the cybercrime underground. And at some point, however, I decided this wasn't acceptable for the institutions that held significant chunks of our money. I began talking about our business away from those that couldn't let me add a simple verbal passphrase. Most financial institutions will let customers add verbal passwords or personal PINs as part of a two-factor security or separate from any online banking passwords. Even so, many instances don't properly train their customer service support staff or have high turnovers in the department. This allows clever and insistent crooks to coax customer service reps into validating the call with just a social security number, a date of birth, base knowledge authentication. So-called base knowledge authentication has been out there a very, very long time. Noted several stories here previously. Identity thieves could reliably work around what's called base knowledge authentication because it involves answering some questions about things like previous loans, addresses, co-resident information that can be geared from online services or social media. A few years ago, I began testing financial institutions that held our personal assets. I was pleased and surprised to discover that most of them were happy to add PINs or passphrases to an account, but many of the customer service personnel in those institutions failed in their response when I called in and said I didn't remember the phrase, that was there any way I could verify who I was. Unfortunately, I ended up moving our investment in institutions that constantly adhered to the requirements. So that's very interesting. The verbal password. Equifax has reopened a website that lets anyone look up the salary history of a large portion of the American workforce using a little more than a person's social security number and their date of birth. The free credit bureaus took the site down just hours after I wrote about it on October the 8th. An issue involves Equifax division called the work number. Now, why would you say this is important open source report? Well, it's important because it is security. What is needed is to access your salary and employment history. Go here and enter the employer's name or employer's code, and after it asks for user ID, this might sound like privileged information, but in most cases, this is just the worker's social security number, or a portion of it. In other words, usually the last four numbers. The next step, the site will ask visitors to enter your PIN, short for a personal identification number. However, in a vast majority of cases, This appears to be little more than someone's 8-digit date of birth. The formula differs by place of employment. Successful verification to the system produces two sets of data: an employee's salary, employee's employment history, going back to at least a decade, 10 years. In a study of the financial industry of National Mortgage News, Equifax said as access to employers' portal is restored, individuals must be authenticated and establish a unique PIN. Therefore, the data exposed in the cyber incident will not be sufficient to access the work number. Well, that is one of the things that is more of a, I guess you'd say, a precursor. People that really know how to do this don't rely upon those kinds of work situations. They really don't need to. It is not part of their quote-unquote portfolio. So there are instances when these data portals, for people that are really in the know, it's a little bit different kind of a ball game out there. GIMP, I don't know if people use GIMP. That's an image and open source a program that can be easily used. Not as they say, a brain drainer, or a brain teaser, as one would say. Let's go to opensource.com here. 7 stages of becoming a Go programmer. We've had this up here for a long time, and finally want to get it out of the way. One day at work, we were discussing Go, the programming language, in our chat room. You believe you can make Go do objective-oriented programming. After initial run of a tour of Go, you start thinking about how I can make this language behave more like an objective language. And of course, this is not true. You do not do objective programming in Go, period. Well, yeah, no doubt about that. Step, you believe Go routines will solve your problems. You are lured to Go by the promise that it will allow you to easily run concurrent code, which it does via Go routine set. I won't go much into this. I just saw this article around, and you believe instant that instead of objective-oriented program interface, it will solve all of your problems. After being disillusioned, you cannot make your objects behave. The capabilities of offering interface, etc. You believe channels will solve all of your problems after spending a lot of time pondering how to bend Go to work. But Go is an interesting language. You believe Go is not as powerful as people claim. Why is it so powerful? Writing Go code, you are frustrated. Concurrency is hard. Channels don't solve your problems. These are 6 stages, and you realize that stage 1 through 5 was just your imagination. Now you're at peace. You accepted the Go way. You can write anything, including what you would normally not use in Perl, Ruby, or Python. In Go, you realize that if error equals nil, no. Anyway, you're one with the Gopher. Congratulations, you're now a Go program. Well, anyway, we'll have to include this on the show plate. We Go. This is at opensource.com. We won't mess with dealing with .NET here. More resources here. Top articles from a community update. This is in October on November the 9th. Let's see. Yeah, opensource.com had 711,000 unique visitors. So a lot of people have rallied there. We held an annual, this is in North Carolina, Open.org, the open organization community at opensource.com, to unveil new and exciting additions to open organization book. And some things that are popular reading. I guess Kubernetes is so popular. Is one to use Raspberry to turn. Wait a minute, hold on. Oh, well, these Arduino and a Raspberry Pi to turn a fiber optics network into wall art. I don't know. Getting started. Anyway, 7 sins of documentation. These are just some articles to read here. If you go to Dave's electronic engineers blog and his YouTube channel, you'll find all you want to know about Arduino and Raspberry Pi. We'll have to link that down. Kind of. Incidentally, Raspberry Pi, I'm sorry. I'm getting the Pi all the time. Anyway, is an open source hardware device. Learn how a machine learning algorithm can produce a beautiful wall decoration. Interesting here. Hollywood has made many big promises about AI, artificial intelligence, how it will destroy us or save us. Anyway, I'll have to put this on. These little objects are kind of fascinating here. The Raspberry Pi Zero and these little Arduino boards make the LTD something to sort of mess around with. I'll put this on the Cranston software Twitter feed so you can find it. One of those little things here. Hopefully we'll get it on there. Yeah, we did. Okay. And the little lights here and those sort of things. This is one of those little projects that you can do. It really become very popular out here. I was just looking at another little project with Google. Google project with the Raspberry Pi from one of the retailers here. And, sure which retailer. I think. Let's see. This is at one of the Google Voice voice kit. About $25. It's one of those do-it-yourself projects, and you can build a standalone voice recognition system using Google Assistant if you want to, and add voice recognition and natural language processing to your Raspberry Pi based project. So you're seeing more and more of this kind of stuff out here, and more in terms of open source hardware. So this is some of the things you look to. So we've taken care of that. Wait a minute here. That's not what we were looking at here. We were looking for something else, but sometimes you don't find what you're looking when you are looking here. And well, I think we finished up with Linux .com and the let me see, did we get contain? Yeah, we did all of that. But just the sheer volume of things that are coming out. Well, we'll look at Kubernetes here and Dockers. We've always been container runtime is a software that executes containers and manages container images on a node, no doubt. Today, the most widely known container is Docker. No doubt about that. And Kubernetes introduced an integrated plugin, API, named Container Runtime Interface. So that is out there. And Kubernetes, incidentally, has become very, very big. The Kubernetes an open source system for automating deployment, scaling, and operation applications. This is on the 7th here, 2nd of November, excuse me. Containers bringing more container runtime operation to Kubernetes. A number of a container runtime is a software that executes containers and manages container images on a node. Today is widely known. Well, we already threw that one. And Kubernetes 1.5, a customized runtime interface. Here, over the past 6 months, engineers from Google, Docker, IBM, a lot of collaboration going on here. The project is called CR Contained, which has its featured compiler. It's an alpha compiler out there that was released in September. Contained is an ORI compliant core container. And it was initially by Dockers and donated to them. And of course, it's in a beta now, set up, and a little bit about the architecture. It's an alpha release that was on the 25th. Try it out. Well, we'll place this particular one out there, so you'll be able to look at containers. And let me see, I think E, we've already looked at E. Yeah, we won't get into sprucing up Word, but what we shall get into here is Google's O language. Google's Oreo. I think we can. Oh, this is incidentally, this is Android 8. This is an update here, about 10 days ago, but that's okay. Google Oreo has a Google here with an Oreo cookie. And Google Oreo is the official name of the next version of Google's more popular operating system. Let me see when this is. Particular for dates is part of my lore training. Anyway, well, we're not going to get it. What we're getting is a commercial for some snack. In terms of highlights, Oreo focuses on speed and efficiency for many phone updates to 8, another name for Oreo's boost speed will increase as much as 2 times. As we've personally seen in Google, with the Google Pixis. While it's light on visual change, Oreo packs in some useful tweets, like a picture in a picture, on Google Hangouts, YouTube, etc. Anyway, oops. if you don't own a Google Pixel 2, Google Pixel, whatever, you'll have to wait to continue. For some phone manufacturers, that means a matter of months, while others are much closer. Companies are typically quiet on those developments. That's an unfortunate situation there. Google has confirmed that Oreo updates will hit devices for many by the end of the year, and we're getting close to that. Hardware makers, including Essential, General Mobile, Nokia, LG, Motorola, Samsung, Sharp, etc., schedule launch upgrades to it, depending on what phone you have. And that's kind of where there's a little bit of a problem there. Sometimes there are versions that you can get of this, and from Samsung, this is kind of an unfortunate thing. You'll have to wait 2018 to get it. The manufacturers always lag. We'll put Oreo up here. We started this presentation, went into it a bit there. Notifications, unlike iOS, implementation through the dots on Google is introducing notification dots in apps and allowing you to quickly see what's happening without opening the app up. Very good idea there. Double the speed, twice as fast at boot time. Claims that Android Oreo will be able to load applications and boot up. And we talked a little bit about that. Longer lasting batteries, one of the little things there. Fancy app icons, clever recopy and place. So that's basically the wrap, as they say, on Google's new operating system 8. A lot of these out there, and that reason we put it was it is it's kind of interesting here, and we'll conclude the report. Hopefully not rambling too much here. Anyway, aluminum foil can actually help to fix Hi-Fi hotspot's weakness. It sounds like something dreamed up by a tin-foil hat-wearing brigade, but new research has proved to be a simple 3D printed piece of plastic cover from aluminum foil. You're probably aware most Wi-Fi routers emit a wireless signal in directions with more or less equal strength. Multiple benefits: not only strengthens your signal in certain areas by redirecting towards the Wi-Fi weak spot. How it works from Dartmouth College, by simply playing around with an aluminium or aluminum can, cut open in a semicircle shape. Use this as a crude reflector with some success. They show it here, and the results will be impressive indeed. The solution will only cost around $35 compared to a full-fledged directional antenna, which will be incredibly more costly. If you don't have access to a 3D printer, theoretically you can make a cuddler version with a cardboard and foil, although it's not as effective. So I suppose the scheme is go find a 3D printer, and you can make this little device, and you are in the business. So, we'll end our open source report. Hopefully we'll add some audio from the Google Chrome Developers Conference about about Oreo and what they're trying to do with Oreo. That, in other words, that is Android number 8. We'll talk to you soon from Old Crescent Software in the beginning, I suppose, of the winter. Good day and have a good day.
Useful and real, but they're beautiful, immersive experiences.
So we want to inspire all of you on what's possible today on the web, share really great partner journeys and success stories to give you ideas. But this isn't just about doing something that's never been done before or couldn't have been done before.
No, not at all. I mean, so I'm an avid scuba diver, right? And I live in Seattle, and we have really strong tides, and we need a slide update, I think. That's not supposed to be there. But we get really strong tides in Seattle. And this is the experience of how I used to get tides. Let's switch over to the demo screen. And
there you go.
There we go. So this is what I used to use to check tides, to see when I could dive. And it's really kind of a painful experience, to be honest, because like if I want to flip between days, I actually have to use these drop downs. I have to remember what day of the month it is, which I can never do without actually looking somewhere else on my phone. So it's kind of a pain. It's not the best. And the team at Dockyard actually has built this application that I frankly instantly fell in love with. It's called High Tide. And this is a progressive web app. It's actually starting up cold here. So it figures out, loads up, and it figures out, oh, you're in San Francisco, because it has geoloc access. But I actually want to see what the tides are like in Seattle. So I'm going to type in Seattle and go check the station. Okay, so I'm flying home on Wednesday, and actually, it kind of looks like Wednesday afternoon is a perfect time to go diving. So I'll have to get my gear packed up. Now, this isn't a killer app, right? This isn't like, oh my God, I could never get tides before or something. I've been able to look up tides forever. But this is a much smoother experience. It's really smooth scrolling. It starts up really quickly. And actually, it still kind of half works offline. It gives me an experience, at least, while I'm offline, even if it can't generate the tide tables. And this is really underscoring the point that it's not just good enough to just provide a service anymore. You actually have to prioritize your user experience. This is what users expect now. So let's flip back to the screen. Here we go. Like, I would radically prefer this experience on the right rather than the experience on the left.
And so this is what users expect out of something that they want to use frequently. And so the core concept we want to get across today, and our goal for all of you, is really, it's time to raise the bar for what you can deliver for your user experiences. We know we can all do better, and we want you to exceed user expectations for what's possible on the web. We all know that the web is great for user reach. It's the front door for so many of companies and services. And now we want you to believe that the web can be used as a great user experience platform.
We've been using this term, progressive web app, for about 2 years, a little over 2 years now. And we want to be clear, this is really just a placeholder for this new higher bar for delivering web applications. Like when we talk about service worker or add to home screen or app manifest, push notifications, all these different technologies, this isn't really like we wanted to categorize this as an app. It's really care about your user experience, provide a better user experience. In fact, the progressive web app pillars are really just about doing that, providing a great user experience, like not even 3G, but 2G. So worldwide, this is a much more critical problem than you might understand. And in a nutshell, what we're really saying is you have to focus on making your experience fast. It needs to load instantly. And I'm going to leave most of this to a session from Addie later this afternoon, but we really wanted to share some successes from being fast. For example, LMA is the biggest food ordering and delivering company in China. They launched the first progressive web app for the domestic Chinese market, and they serve 260 million users. 260 million. To put this in context, because 250 million doesn't really register to me, this is almost as much as the entire population of the United States. That's their customer base. They actually have 1.3 million restaurants listed in their app. And 99% of their users order food from mobile devices. So it's kind of critical for them to have a good experience, right? And LMA set out to improve their mobile experience, focusing on speed and reliability, but particularly in flaky connections. So they use an app shell. They want to get skeleton screens on screen really quickly. And they want to ensure that whenever a user taps a button, it gives them something. It shows them this feedback that, hey, something's happening, don't worry, we know what you're doing. And transition to that page, and they get their skeleton paint up in 400 milliseconds on a mobile connection. They actually get fully interactive in 2 seconds in typical conditions. Like, this is pretty amazing to me. This is awesome. And this critical focus on page load time, by the way, this user interaction, was really the goal of the AMP project. AMP's built on web components and HTML. I think that's great. It's a way to easily build fast and reliable pages on the web.
So it's amazing to see all this momentum with AMP. They just had their 2-year anniversary last week, where they announced that there are now 4 billion AMP pages out in the wild across 25 million domains. That's an incredible milestone. And AMP is really continuing to evolve and to support additional use cases, especially when it comes to e-commerce. You see here a couple of examples of e-commerce sites that have built highly interactive pages. It's possible to build a product page that updates the availability
that you can then just incorporate into your own code. Using workbooks means instead of boilerplate code such as this, you can bring it all down. You can choose from a set of caching strategies that are available to you and just choose the one that makes sense. So you take Workbox, and it really streamlines the creation of service worker-enabled sites and is used by 70% of all shipped service worker sites around the world today. Definitely recommend that you check it out.
Service Worker requires that sites use HTTPS for all of their requests. So this gives us a natural opportunity to check in on our efforts to drive HTTPS adoption around the world. We've been at this for many years now, and we've been evangelizing the importance of HTTPS and investing in making it easier for developers to migrate, such as by sponsoring the Let's Encrypt effort along with many other companies in the industry. We're pushing hard here because migrating traffic to a secure transport layer is one of the best ways that we can provide security and protection for our users. We closely monitor how much traffic is passing through HTTPS in Chrome, and we share this with the community in our transparency reports, the latest of which we just released this morning. And we're really pleased with the results. For example, on Android, Chrome is now serving 64% of its traffic over HTTPS, which is a 50% increase year over year from the prior year. And we're seeing strong increases on other platforms too. Also worth noting, 71 of the top 100 sites now default to HTTPS, which is also a big year-over-year increase over 37 sites last year.
So when you consider the huge size of the web, these kinds of changes, these increases are almost stunning. But we know that we're not done yet. Earlier in the year, we started to mark all insecure forms that accept a credit card number and a password as unsafe. What you're going to see from us this year is we're going to mark any insecure form as unsafe. So if you aren't on HTTPS yet, now is the time, and it's never been easier.
Speaking of forms, we think it's really important to streamline the form data entry experience as much as possible. We want to take away as much the friction in the experience as we can. And on mobile, of course, this is even more important. Autofill is one of the ways that we do this. In fact, over 9 billion form interactions every month are aided by autofill. And we found that on Android, we save over 12 seconds on the median form entry when autofill is used. So as developers, we have a big impact on this performance by ensuring that we hint our forms with autofill completion hints, giving our users the smoothest possible experience with autofill.
Chrome Autofill's ability to store credit cards and synchronize them across all of your devices is particularly helpful with web payments. But there's an opportunity to do a lot more here to make web transactions easier. So we've been working on payment request, the new API and browser UI for facilitating web-based payments. J.Crew, the American fashion brand here, recently implemented payment request, and their support is coming. Give it a try.
It's also worth noting that payment request is a particularly good fit for mobile. In fact, I want to give a mobile example now with Fancy.com. Launched a new sign-in library to help.
This library allows developers to take advantage of the fact that millions of users have already signed in with Google properties, and allows you to offer these users a one-time, one-tap sign-up experience. For example, here I'm using Zillow to browse for my new home.
We've already added support for picture-in-picture ensuring that web content is a first-class media citizen on the platform.
We mentioned media sharing earlier. The camera is obviously so important with mobile, and we recently updated the image picker UI in Chrome to make it easier for users to upload their content right from their gallery, as you can see here in this example with Twitter's web property. Then, when you get access to the live camera feed using Get User Media, it now gives you full frame access and the ability to control the camera hardware, such as engaging the flash, mucking around with the ISO levels. And so when you put all of this together, you can really create amazing things.
Take Instagram, the popular photo sharing experience. They've invested in mobile